Hello everyone at home. My name is Polly Bronstein and I'm the CEO of the movement called Darkenu, the largest grassroots movement in Israel that promotes moderate values and tries to organize and mobilize a moderate majority of Israelis. And in the year that has passed, we've been campaigning for separation from the Palestinians, and we've been opposing the attempts to annex the West Bank in Israel.
Well, I think the Israeli media in that aspect is not much different from other countries, other Western countries. It's a process of getting women more up front and center in terms of political debates about security and state issues. It's much easier, I feel like, to get women into panels about financial issues, family issues, educational issues. But when they have a panel about say a negotiation or a state solution, it's much easier to get a man in to sit at that panel. I think we do see a progress in that respect because first of all, a lot of the main anchors in the news in Israel are females, they're women. And so the fact that a woman is leading the panel is of course a major progress for the viewers at home and for women in that profession who want to get a head up. I think there are a lot of female experts in that field that don't get the proper representations, and they don't get asked as much to come and talk about their experiences, but I feel like that is in progress. The media might have it easier to have women as the grieving mothers when it comes to if during wartime or operation time. It's much easier to interview women as grieving mothers or sisters than it is to bring them as experts on security issues, which I feel we are progressing, and I think it's getting a little better, and it's very important that they are represented. It's a different voice, it's an important voice, and I feel like we're heading in the right direction in that term.
I don't think there's a scheme of men trying to inhibit women from participating in negotiations or political correspondence or anything like that. But I do feel that the discourse in general, when it comes to conflict, when it comes to war, when it comes to anything that involves or entails military, first of all, we all know that there's a military discourse in Israel, especially when it comes to the conflict, obviously. And the codes, the symbols, everything that we use in the language is comprised of what's referred to as masculine codes. To answer your question, I do feel that might inhibit or deter women from taking part. There is a hegemony, it's a masculine hegemony. It relates to the weapons industry, it relates to the anchors and news correspondence, and Ehud Yaari and Dana Weiss, the whole kerfuffle that we saw in March 2016. Ehud Yaari, a leading military and political correspondent, basically dismissed what she had to say. And she exhibited what they refer to as a very feminist agenda or mindset. Perhaps the conflict, the international conflict, is not necessarily radical Islam or Islam versus the Western world, but of radicals and extremists versus moderates. And it was dismissed, and Ehud Yaari said, "You don't really know what you're talking about." I said, "Oh, maybe I need to keep to my own feminist interior affairs and so on." And lo and behold, less than a year and a half after, she was appointed as the leading political correspondent for Channel 2. So now, little girls, everyone will see Dana Weiss in this leading position in primetime news talking about the conflict politics, and I think that will help increase the number of women we see in politics in the media in the future.
So, Haredi women don't really have a voice in politics. I was invited to the Committee for Women's Issues, and so the Arab women were presenting how low their numbers are on municipal committees and also on national, the number of MKs they have. And then it came my turn, and it's literally zero. There are no Haredi women appointed in any political position in Israel. So that's just to begin with, the position of Haredi women. In general, Haredi politics are not an open affair. They're not democratic internally, meaning also men don't have like a way of getting in. There's like a hegemony inside of the Haredi community, and that, let's say, I don't know how much it is, but let's say it's 10% of people, and that 10% is all men. But the rest of all the men are in the same position as the women. They don't really have any way of expressing a voice. I do think that in the end, I don't know if it's just one disadvantage or a double disadvantage, but I didn't serve in the army, and I don't know anything about the military in Israel. Like, in that sense, I'm not Israeli. I don't understand military jargon and slang. I mean, I learn it, but it's like foreign to me. I never served. I don't know what the terms mean. In that sense, I'm on the same playing field as men in my community, because they also don't serve in the military. So what gives men in the secular, general Israeli public an advantage doesn't give them an advantage. Even the MKs, I'm friends with one of the Haredi MK's sons. So I asked him one time, just over dinner, if I asked your father and he was in a good mood, what suggestion would he give me? And he sits on the defense committee. I said, what would he suggest for the conflict? What's he for? What's he against? He said, I have no idea. I said, really? You never discussed it? He said, I don't think he has any idea either. And he's been in the Knesset for over a decade, and he doesn't have an opinion on the matter. It's not what concerns him. He's concerned with internal politics and internal issues, whatever they may be, whether it's funding for yeshivot or avoiding draft for Haredi men, or all kinds of, or housing or education. There's plenty of things to deal with, but that issue isn't even it's not a main issue in my community. For me it is, and that's how I became involved in anything political. And from there I continued on to be involved in other things, but that personally was a trigger for me.
I think we should begin with saying that only a quarter of the 120 MKs are women, which is, I think, the largest number we ever had. That's from 2015 on. And they come from all parties, except for the two Haredi parties. And I should say something about Lo Nivcharot, Lo Bechorot. I was a spokesperson, and we got to the Supreme Court, and they said, you were too late. I think it's just an excuse to not deal with that, because this is still a very, very, very difficult matter in Israel. But yet, with what Pnina said, now it's a fact. Women do go to politics, like Haredi women, or even just religious, would say. And in the end, I think that if we have women presenting news in, I think, all of the channels, the 3 leading channels, and a quarter of women in the Knesset, which is the parliament, and 2 women in one of the most important committees in the government, it's a progress.
If I may add, to put things in a sort of global perspective, because my previous job, I dealt a lot with comparisons between Israel and the UK. And the numbers in terms of politicians, members of parliament versus members of Knesset, ministers, and so on, they're actually quite similar. And in terms of our region, I mean, we take a lot of pride by knowing that we are in what the right might refer to as a tough neighborhood, and so on, or sometimes Western terminology. You don't see very often grassroots organization or a successful, effective grassroots organizations like Lo Nivcharot, Lo Bechorot, or like what's going on in the Israeli Arab community, as you see in our region. But Britain is known as a beacon of Western ideology, liberalism, feminist ideologies, and so on. So to realize that actually what's happening in reality is actually very similar to Israel nowadays, and it's quite inspiring.
Us, as an organization that has over 2,000 people and supporters in Israel, which is a very, very large support base. Yeah, 220,000, which I didn't want to say exactly because I didn't remember if maybe higher by now. We have a lot of power, and so the MKs do talk to us, and they do correspond with us, and they do ask us our opinion. And that for us is bringing this organization, which is very female oriented as well, to influence how women are intertwined within the state solution and political debates about security and about the future of Israel, which I feel like is a very, very good way to bring it, because I feel like we should do it in a positive way, not just like a battle, because I feel like in previous generations women battled, and we should thank them because we're here today. And I feel like now we need to kind of prove how we can move forward. And I feel like whereas before the military experience was very key in how a person was perceived, if they can talk about the state solution or not, I feel like we're moving towards the fact that it's not as key. Whereas before, I feel like that was key. So I think that's a good progress that we're contributing to as Darkenu.
There is a danger, though, I think, between the separation between civic society and politics and media, because civic society is almost, stereotypically known as something that deals with what's referred to as supposedly feminine issues, civil society, aid, welfare, health, and so on and so forth, without always affecting politics. And
which is why I feel like this is so great, because this is what we do. We support this two-state solution. This is not a female organization for female health issues or educational issues. We're dealing with the subject matter that we are saying that is mostly male-dominated, but we're a very, very strong player in that field.
Okay, so we should open with talking about civil society itself and how many organizations we have in it, which are controlled and being led by women. And that is quite the opposite of what's going on outside in our world, and also the private sector, which is filled with women, like leading women, strong women. Marvelous thing to see. They always say that CEOs and managers or members of Knesset, or even the ex-Prime Minister were like mainly women. And I don't think it's the situation today. I think that we have like nice and strong altogether. I think it's the biggest project that the civil society has these days. I think it's our biggest part in the course of things, and it depends on all of us.
Okay, so I want to give my perspective. I always introduce myself as a political activist, not as a civil society activist. I'm interested in politics because it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing. It's wanting to be where the decisions are made. That's a different story. It's a different game, and that's where I want to be, and that's where I want other women to be from my community and other communities. There's a Beit Midrash in my home that takes place it's been going on for a year and a half. I founded it. There are 10 women that study Talmud in my house, Masechet Kiddushin, every Wednesday night. And the first question I always get is, there's so many things to learn, why do you have to learn that? Because that is what Jews, who are men, have been doing for 2,000 years, and that's the text that they've been studying, and that's the text that guides everything I do in my life. So that's what I want to learn. I feel that the NGOs is like, in an analogy, it's the same way. It's like, that, why don't you do that? I don't want to do that, I want to do this.
I'm very inspired by a movement called Women Wage Peace in Israel that is now bringing not just the voice of women, the voice of mothers. And they don't just do it in Israel, they try to do it together with the other side of the fence, with the Palestinian women, saying, to the leadership in Israel and the Palestinian Authority, enough. We don't care how you do it. We don't care what is the solution at the end. Just sit together and find a way to solve this conflict. We're going to pressure you until you sit down and come up with a solution. Is that kind of the woman's voice which is missing from the attempts to resolve the conflict? Can we change our reality just by having more women sitting inside the table? And for that matter, I want to say, we're not a radical movement. We're a very pragmatic movement. We don't want to send men back home and tell them, thanks for what you did, you failed. now we're going to do it our way, the woman's way. That's not what we're suggesting, but we do suggest having more women because we think it will change the dynamics, because we think it will change the atmosphere. Some of the style that is being used today to negotiate, and let's face it, we are not negotiating. We're sitting here today, it's 2017, and everything is stuck. We're not doing anything with the Palestinians. Strong men on both sides are, digging their heels in the ground and saying, no more, we've done compromising, we're done negotiating, it's your fault, the other side's fault. No talks, we're not talking. And when we're not talking, for sure, we're not going to change reality. We're not going to go anywhere, because by doing things unilaterally, we're not going to change our reality.
One of the most important UN resolutions, which O and I were discussing earlier, was the resolution that women have to be a certain percentage, I don't remember the certain percentage, of all negotiations. And in Israel, which implements that law, there's a new organization called Forum Dvora, and they're an organization of ex-military, ex-Shabak and Mossad females in Israel that are supporting the rising of women in negotiations and as part of the political dialect about security. So I feel that's a very good bright spot for me. I feel like maybe negative spot would be the cultural differences when we come to negotiations with Palestinian Authority, and Israel as a Western country is trying to make women as more present as possible, and Palestinian Authority does not have any female politicians in it.
I'm aware that women have a different voice, but I don't always like to address that because I feel like it's sometimes not the most complimentary thing. Like when people say women bring a different voice, they sometimes mean they're very nice, they're very flexible. It's true, so it helps in certain senses, like that if you're less threatening, you can use that advantage and advance issues that you want through that. But in general, I think it's also a question of statistics. A very small amount of people want to be in the position of negotiation, and you're automatically removing 50% of those people by teaching them at a very young age that they don't belong there. So you're losing out, just like in the workforce. If you don't have enough women, you're losing out on a lot of good people just by doing that.
Again, it's not about changing to put a woman instead of a position of a man. It's about having influence that touches all aspects of society.